Hi, I'm Phil Parker. I'm a designer, but I don't design new machines, new materials, new fabrics. I design new ways of thinking. Recently, I had the pleasure, as many of you have, to watch The King's Speech. King's Speech, very interesting film. One of the things that I and much other audience watching it found was it was really difficult to watch right at the beginning when the king began to speak but stuttered and found himself completely unable to express himself. There's moments when Colin Firth is seen almost choking and retching on words where he'd be going. Watching it and having worked with lots of people with speech problems, it struck me that to convey that amount of experience of what it's really like to be able to stutter or stammer or have a speech impediment means that Colin Firth must have spent quite some time observing, talking to people, hanging around people who had those kind of problems. Because he was so able to replicate the experience so that us all watching felt moved, upset, engaged, stressed for him. That's quite a skill. Obviously, it's the skill of an actor. The process that Colin Firth would have gone through is something called modelling, which is where you observe enough people and start to understand not only what they look like when they're doing it, but what is going through their minds that allows them to get into that state, that causes them to get into that state of stuckness. And I think that came across very powerfully in his performance. It reminds me of something else that I experienced in modelling, because modelling is something that I do a lot of. It's a lot of what I do is look at people who have got stuck and ask, well, why have they got stuck? And look at people who have freed themselves and ask myself, how did they get free? Just try and start to create a structure for other people to make that same transition. I was talking to a friend of mine called Andy, who's a very, very famous mime artist. And he does a performance, which he occasionally does, where he replicates the whole of the Apollo 11 moon landings just using his hands. So he represents the rockets and the landing and the moon. It's an extraordinary thing that he does. And I was talking to him one day about the moon landings and discussing the conspiracy theories around the moon landings, which is it never really happened, that people never went to the moon, that all the photos are fake. And there are some interesting bits of information that suggest this might be true. For instance, there's a picture of a flag, a photo of a flag on the moon that seems to be waving, and of course the moon has no atmosphere. There's some artifacts found on photos that don't quite fit. So I was asking him his opinion, and he had a very interesting perspective on it. He said, I've talked to a number of the astronauts who were on the moon landings, Apollo 11 mission. He says, I don't know if it happened or not, but one thing I can tell you, said, because I had to talk to them in enough detail to understand the experience of what it's like to not have no gravity, to be orbiting the moon, to see the moon in order to create my show and convince other people of the reality that this is a space rocket. Said, when I talk to these guys and spend quite a lot of time hanging around them, one thing's for certain, they are certain they went to the moon. And when you think about it, it's be quite difficult to get someone, particularly an astronaut who's a scientist and a pilot and somebody who's very aware of things, to somehow fool them into thinking they'd been to the moon if they hadn't. Remember what he said? He said they definitely thought they'd been to the moon. But not only did they think they'd been to the moon, their bodies thought they'd been to the moon, in that when they were talking about gravity, they expressed in a way that would be very difficult to express the lack of gravity unless you'd really felt it on an ongoing basis. Modelling is very interesting. If we can understand how people do things, we can start to look at, is there a way for them to do it differently? And it's really the core behind any decent training, any decent understanding of how people function or don't function. If you're interested in modelling, there's lots of stuff on my website about it and podcasts. If you're particularly interested in speech issues, then again, I've made a very special free podcast for you if you're interested about some of the approaches you can use. It's a starting point. You probably will be better off seeing me or one of my clinic to do some one-on-one work, but it's a good place to start to realise that You don't have to have this. This is something you can change. And with the modern techniques we have, it doesn't have to be quite as slow as it was in the 1930s, I think it was, when the film was set. So I hope you found it useful. If you want the free podcast, the free MP3 about speech, please go to www.philparker.org. Bye.